Do you know what happened to the 143 girls who entered a stone fortress in Pennsylvania and were never seen again? Their names were erased, their voices were stolen, and for over a century, no one dared to speak about what happened inside those walls. Picture this. You're standing in front of a rusted iron gate, half swallowed by moss and thorns. Behind it, the skeleton of a building that shouldn't exist, carved into the crumbling archway, barely visible beneath decades of decay. Aura's House of Restoration for Wayward Girls. 1862. 143 girls walked through those gates. Not one of them came home. This isn't legend. This is American history. The kind they don't teach in schools. The kind buried beneath vines and silence and institutional shame. Because I found the ledger. It was mid-October when the university sent me to catalog old parish records from a defunct diocese in Pennsylvania. Just another freelance research gig. Dusty boxes, fading ink, baptismal records no one would ever read, until I found the journal. It was tucked inside a mislabeled box of funeral notices, bound in cracked leather and sealed with a black ribbon. The smell hit me first. Mildew mixed with something metallic. Across the front, in flaking gold script, inventory. St. Alora's House of Restoration, 1862 to 1891. There was no file for it in the diocesan archive. No registry, no map, nothing. But inside that ledger were 143 entries, each one just a first name, a number, and a final column marked fate. Most entries said, departed, no dates, no details. Some had only an X, others, nothing at all. Clara, Justine, Rosalind, Elsie. Names pressed into fading ink. Names no one had spoken in over a century. And that's when the dreams began. Every night, I saw them. Faceless girls standing behind narrow windows. Muffled voices from under floorboards. A bell ringing where there was no tower. St. Alora's was never meant to be a school. It was meant to be a prison. In 1861, a cloistered nun named Mother Agatha Vale claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to her, instructing her to build a sanctuary to cleanse young women of their impurities. Not a home, a reformatory. A place to remove the girls from the world. She found a hillside 17 miles from the nearest town. Within 8 months, stone was laid, and what they built was not a refuge. It was a fortress. The main residence hall, a chapel with a bell tower, servant quarters, agricultural fields, and an incinerator attached to the laundry house. The walls were 18 inches thick, windows were narrow and positioned high, too high for a child to reach. The doors bolted from the outside. There were no telegraph lines, no visitors, no public-facing records. The first 12 girls arrived in winter 1862, ages 9 to 16. Some were orphans. Others came from upper-class families who paid to have their daughters removed after acts of defiance or promiscuity. According to fragments of letters from a former groundskeeper named Elias Furlow, The girls were stripped of their names on arrival, given numbers, uniformed in gray wool, heads cropped short, voices taken. He wrote, "They're to be like lambs, silent and clean before the slaughter." Mother Agatha believed sin was lodged in the bones, that repentance required excavation. Her methods were modeled on ancient ascetic practices: fasting, flagellation, extended isolation in reflection chambers. And she didn't do it alone. Sister Marcella was the arm of correction, tall, stern, carved from old discipline. She oversaw discipline, corporal and psychological. Girls who resisted were subject to the stations of reflection, a ritualized punishment based on the passion. One surviving note reads, "She made me kneel in rice for 2 hours. I lost feeling in my legs. She whispered behind me, 'Let your body break so your spirit might live.'" Sister Eugenie was different, soft-voiced, mild-mannered. She offered healing tinctures and cleansing teas, but in truth, she was a chemical manipulator, mixing foxglove, belladonna, datura, laudanum, substances meant to induce weakness, visions, silence. Girls who drank her infusions reported vivid dreams, memory lapses, disembodiment. In the ledgers, these episodes were labeled episodes of grace. Their delusions became tools. Brother Thorne was the only man allowed on the grounds. He claimed to be a defrocked Jesuit, but no record of his ordination existed. He built the reflection chambers, the underground tunnels, the night corridors that allowed staff to move unseen. Girls he favored were never seen again. No one dared question why his boots were often muddy long after sunset. Sister Isolde was perhaps the most dangerous, not because she hurt the girls, but because she made the world forget they existed. She handled all external communication, wrote letters to families, filed forged progress reports, signed names in the girls' own handwriting. She maintained 2 ledgers: the white ledger, used in official diocesan reports, listed names, dates of admission, baptismal status transfers, no deaths, no accidents. But hidden beneath her cot was the red ledger, just numbers and brief, brutal notations. Number 31, refused communion, removed. Number 58, spoke during night silence, transferred. Number 112, attempted escape, reassigned. TT, what TT stood for wouldn't be clear until much later. The world never ran out of girls. For wealthy families, the process was discreet. They used euphemisms: moral retreat, temporary seclusion, religious reform. A donation was arranged. A carriage was sent, no return scheduled. In return, families received handwritten letters from Sister Isolde, always signed in the girl's own hand, though not one of them had ever touched a pen again. For working-class girls, the process was more brutal. They came from overcrowded orphanages, debt-ridden farms, poor urban parishes. All it took was a whisper that a girl had been seen laughing with a boy. No charges, no defense, just referral through the church's Moral Custody Act, a policy that allowed girls deemed at risk of impropriety to be institutionalized with ecclesiastical approval. These girls arrived in the dark, often in chains. After a week in reflection and a sip of Sister Eugenie's cleansing tea, the fight drained out of them. By the second week, they didn't speak. By the third, they didn't remember. Once inside, each girl was assigned a number and classification. GC, Grave Candidate FS, Fit for Servitude TT, to be transferred SI, Spiritually Irretrievable. Sister Rebecca, Marcella's niece, oversaw intakes. She had a gift for psychological reading. Her notebook described the girls in terms of usefulness. Number 28, passive, dissociative, promising for labor. Number 36, defiant, unbroken, risk, recommend retreat. Number 47, expressive eyes, deep attachment to dorm mates, dangerous, recommend, termination. By 1870, the population at St. Elora hovered around 60 to 70 girls at any given time, yet the annual intake was 20 to 30 girls. Where were they going? There were no transfers, no graves, no newspaper clippings, no departure notices, because Mother Agatha, Marcella, Eugenie, Isolde and Thorne had built something far more chilling than a reformatory. They had built a self-contained system of purification and erasure. St. Elora was not built for sound. The floors were stone, the walls double-lined with lime plaster and horsehair, thick enough to muffle cries. The silence wasn't a byproduct, it was the point. From the moment a girl entered, she was told, "Speech is sin," until sanctified. For the first 30 days, girls were placed in vocal fasting. They could not speak to staff, could not whisper to each other, could not hum, could not cry audibly. A single infraction earned reflection time. An unlit cell beneath the dormitory, no larger than a coffin, stood on end, just enough room to sit, not enough to stretch. Some girls came out broken, others didn't come out at all. The building was shaped like a crucifix. At night, the halls were patrolled by Brother Thorne. The girls called him the Shadow Man. His keyring could be heard before he arrived, always a second too late. The dormitories had names no one spoke aloud. The Hall of Salt, where newcomers stayed. The Dorm of Grace, for obedient girls. The Cold Ward, where sick or disruptive girls were taken. Few returned. Clara Mullen was number 41. She kept a piece of chalk hidden inside her mattress seam. Each time a girl disappeared, she marked a cross on the underside of her bed slat. By spring, there were 13 marks. She tried to track them. She kept their names in her head like prayers. Elsie, who whispered jokes during laundry. Winifred, who cried silently. Joe, who traced birds on the dorm wall with her finger. Each gone without warning. By morning, the bed was stripped, their number gone from the board. Girls learned not to ask. When one whispered, "Where is she?" Sister Marcella appeared within minutes. Punishments followed, not just for the speaker, but for the whole dormitory. Marcella called it communal atonement. 3 days without food, one hymn on repeat. There was a courtyard where girls were allowed 1 hour of sunlight a day. They called it the Garden of Lamentation. In the center stood a withered tree, where girls were made to dig shallow trenches as preparation for humility. They never saw where the dirt went. Clara wrote in her hidden chalk journal, "They make us dig holes every third day. The holes are the size of graves. I think they are graves. Last week I saw Joe's cross necklace in the dirt, near one. I buried it, just in case someone is watching. It wasn't the beatings that wore the girls down. It was the silence, the slow erosion of connection, the knowing that no one was coming, that to speak was to vanish. The staff weren't trying to reform them, they were trying to erase them." The fire began in the laundry house. Late autumn, 1866, just past midnight. By morning, the structure was blackened brick. The air smelled of ash, burnt wool, and something metallic that clung to the grass for days. The official cause: a lantern left burning. The official toll: 3 girls lost, but the charred bones recovered beneath the collapsed lintel told a different story. They were chained together at the ankles. Mother Agatha requested a replacement staff member. What she got was Sister Corvina Bell, a 24-year-old novice from the coastal convent of St. Thela. She'd seen amputations, fevers, the slow death of men with lungs full of blood, but nothing prepared her for the stillness of St. Alora. Her first week passed without incident until she noticed something strange. Every few nights, a different group of girls was missing from their dormitory. Not absent all day, just between 2 and 4 a.m., always ages 12 to 15, returned by sunrise, exhausted, pale, sometimes limping. On her 10th night, Corvina passed through the West Wing corridor. There, at the far end, she saw a lantern, held by Brother Thorn. Behind him, 6 girls followed in a line, barefoot, hair unbraided, faces blank. They looked drugged. The girls followed Thorn down the stairs behind the chapel, toward the incinerator wing. She would not see them again for 3 days. The next morning, she asked Sister Eugenie where the girls had gone. Eugenie didn't blink. "They attend the night choir." "I've never heard of that practice." Eugenie smiled, small and sad. "It is not for the newly arrived." Corvina began keeping illegal notes tucked between pages of her psalter. She tried speaking to the girls. Most looked through her. Some flinched. One whispered, "Don't ask, it calls them." Corvina began to unravel. She stopped sleeping, jumped at footsteps. One night she returned to her cot to find her psalter missing. In its place, a slip of paper. "Obedience is peace. Silence is sanctity. Curiosity is pride." Mother Agatha. The next day, Sister Isolde assigned her to inventory old baptismal records. There, in a water-damaged crate, she found a register with burn marks along the edge. 17 names, all girls, all marked Deo Vocata, called by God. None of those names appeared in any dorm, not in the ledgers, not on rosters, and one, Mariel Coates, was a name Corvina had seen scrawled in blood on the inside of the infirmary storage cabinet. Just 3 letters, MC. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been a cover-up. That night, Corvina followed the lantern light down the stairs behind the chapel. What she found was a stone corridor lined with hooks, scraps of linen, iron restraints, a basin that smelled of bile and bleach. and a canvas-covered mound. In the corner, small, human-shaped, she fled when she confronted Mother Agatha. Agatha only nodded. "You were not ready. Now you are. It is time for your vow of silence." That night, Sister Corvina Bell was moved to the cold ward. She would remain there unseen for 11 months. The furnace stood at the far end of the west wing, its chimney black with soot, always smoking, even in summer. The girls called it the Wall of Ash. They said the walls near it wept black, that if you pressed your ear against the bricks at night, you could hear breathing. The incinerator had been Brother Thorne's first construction, an enormous brick structure with iron doors the size of coffins and a rear loading chute accessible only through a bolted hatch. It operated constantly, day and night, regardless of whether the laundry piles were full. In 1870, when floods forced water into the lower corridors, bone fragments surfaced in the overflow drain behind the incinerator. A phalange, half a jawbone, a silver cross, melted at the edges. The items were quietly collected, labeled medical specimens. The man who found them was never invited back. Behind the incinerator was a ledger bound in dark leather, stamped only with the letter T. Inside were diagrams and entries. Number 59, volatile, final weight 70 lb. Number 104, expired under sedation, cremated within 36 hours. Residue dense, recommend double cycle. Every girl knew. Once you were labeled GC, grave candidate, you had no more than a week. What happened next was ritualistic. Sister Eugenie administered her final tea. Sister Marcella shaved the girl's head. A final hymn was sung in the chapel. They called it the Narrow Ascension, but not every girl was burned. Some were deemed FS, fit for servitude. They were trained in embroidery, cooking, obedience. Once ready, they were shipped out through a network of church-affiliated benefactors, wealthy households, boarding schools, overseas missions. Officially, these were holy placements. In truth, they were indentured contracts. From Sister Isolda's hidden ledger, N91, sold to Herrick Estate, New York. Documentation forged, N95, unsuitable for placement. Refused scripture, reassigned to wall. N96, strong, minimal resistance, approved for Lisbon shipment. By 1875, the system had evolved into a well-oiled enterprise. Each disappearance had a paper trail that never pointed inward. Each family received elegant letters copied by Isolda in the girl's own hand, each including a closing prayer and postscript. She remembered you in her final breath. In 1876, a priest from Boston visited Father Dwyer, investigating rumors of impropriety. He stayed 2 days. On departure, he received a hand-stitched stole made by 6 FS girls. 3 weeks later, Father Dwyer donated $2,000. His report, Saint Alora, is a shining example of redemptive education. I observed no misconduct. All 6 girls were gone by the time his letter reached Rome. On the night of June 14, 1878, during a thunderstorm, Lightning struck the east spire. It split the cross in half and scorched the ropes in the belfry. The bells did not ring. In that silence, a girl escaped. Her name was Joanna Wren, 13 years old, labeled fluorine monosulfide conditional. But Joanna had one thing the sisters didn't see. She could remember. While the sisters scrambled to contain the storm damage, Joanna slipped past the open gate in the garden wall. The old willow had fallen, crushing the southern corner. She ran barefoot through mud and wild brush, 2 miles to a gamekeeper's cottage at the edge of Harrow's Wood. She collapsed on his porch. The man's name was Gareth O'Connell, 61, widowed, partially deaf. When he opened the door to see a girl, soaked, shaking, covered in welts, he brought her inside without question. She told him about the silence, the digging, the numbers, the night choir, the smell from the West Wing. 3 days later, he walked the girl into the nearest parish office and made his report. The bishop's office received the account with skepticism, but then came an anonymous letter. Inside, a photograph of a burned cross necklace, a list of 12 first names with dates of transfer, a quote, "They went below the chapel, but never rose again." For the first time in 27 years, Saint Alora was placed under quiet review. 2 priests arrived. Mother Agatha greeted them with bread, wine, and scripture. She offered freshly rewritten ledgers. They left with samples of embroidery and 3 letters written in childlike script from dead girls. But someone else had seen Joanna's escape, a kitchen girl named Mara Lang. She said nothing for weeks, until Sister Eugenie slipped laudanum into her tea. When Mara awoke in the infirmary, she began speaking. She didn't run, she left. The wall was open. The bells didn't stop her. Within 48 hours, Mara was transferred to the cold ward. Within 72, she was gone. Gareth O'Connell received an unsigned note. "Leave the girl at the chapel steps. You will not be warned again." He did not obey. Instead, he put Joanna on a coal train to Boston under a false name. Joanna Wren disappeared from records in 1880, but a Miss J. Ward, who worked at a girls' shelter in Vermont from 1884 to 1909, once wrote, "The silence in some institutions is not peace, it is burial." They believed Clara Mullen was dead. She had vanished in 1866, marked unsuitable, sent to the cold ward. But Clara hadn't died. She had escaped, and she remembered everything. She returned in 1880 under the name Sister Elra Miles, sent by the Order of St. Bridget to observe St. Alora's practices. By then, Clara was 34, with streaks of gray and eyes that never blinked long. She knew exactly what to say. She also knew where they buried the records, where the hidden stairwell was, where the trapdoor beneath Dormitory 3 creaked. Mother Agatha greeted Sister Elra with rehearsed hospitality. "We've not had visitors from Bridget in some time. I go where I'm needed." Clara replied with a serene smile. She had waited 18 years to walk back through those stone corridors, to find the sliver of chalk still wedged behind bed number 41, to stare again at the ceiling of the cold ward. At night, Clara slipped from her quarters and mapped the asylum. The night choir still operated. 2 girls led beneath the chapel, never returned by morning. Clara found Sister Isolde, older now, nearly blind, still transcribing ledgers. These girls come to us in pieces. We shape them back into obedience. Clara asked about Joanna Wren. Isolde's expression didn't change. The wolf always returns to sniff its own trail. Some wolves come back with fire, Clara whispered. In the infirmary supply cabinet, Clara located her old psalter, hidden behind loose paneling. Inside were the chronicled disappearances, chalk tallies, dates, initials. Beneath the back flap was a final entry written in blood. MC, fire, coming. Mariel Coates. Her words had been prophecy. Clara began smuggling items out. Bits of cloth with numbered sleeves, copies of burial records, names never logged. She sent them via horse courier every 3 days. Each dispatch bore a broken bell in wax, but her cover wore thin. On September 2nd, Clara found a note beneath her cot. Your silence was your strength. You've spoken too much. That evening, she was summoned. The chamber below the chapel was darker than she remembered. Sister Marcella waited at the end of the corridor. I remember your eyes, she said. You were supposed to be one of the good ones. I did, Clara said. I carried every name. I never forgot them. Marcella stepped forward, holding a cloth soaked in something bitter. You'll forget them now. But Clara moved first. In her sleeve was lamp oil. In her hand, a striker. She doused the cloth, then the wall, then her own sleeve. I didn't come here to die, Clara whispered, but I'm not leaving without burning the lies from these stones. She struck the flame. The fire didn't consume the asylum, but it scorched the chapel floor, cracked the altar, melted the brass nameplate on the incinerator door. When the sisters arrived, Clara was gone. All that remained were ashes and a psalter open to Psalm chapter 94. They crush your people, O Lord. They kill the widow and the sojourner. They murder the fatherless. The next week, newspapers in Boston received copies of the burial records. Anonymous packages arrived at bishops' homes, postmarked with a broken bow. The evidence was damning. Dozens of forged ledgers, letters from missing girls, photographs of numbered sleeves, scorched hymnals. By the end of 1880, over 137 pages of documentation had reached journalists, bishops, and prosecutors, and yet no formal indictment was ever made. The church launched an internal inquiry. No one was arrested. Mother Agatha was declared unfit due to age-related decline, quietly moved to a hospice in Rome. Sister Isolde vanished from the registry. Rumor claimed she drowned. Her body was never recovered. Brother Thorne retired. His workshop was sealed, the furnace dismantled in silence. Sister Marcella was transferred to the Pyrenees for spiritual rest. She died within the year. No autopsy was performed. The Archdiocese report, while administrative inconsistencies were identified, no criminal activity was substantiated. The matter is closed. 3 weeks later, a journalist who pushed for a criminal trial was found dead in a river, accidental drowning. His notes never recovered. By 1883, the asylum stood mostly abandoned, but no local would go near the cold ward. Some said you could still hear the night choir humming beneath the floorboards. In 1891, a woman named Miriam Wells wrote to a Boston publisher, claiming to be one of the girls transferred in 1869. They told us we were being sent to serve God. I scrubbed blood from flagstones. I was 12. The last thing my sister said to me was, "Don't let them make you forget who you are." I did, for 30 years. The letter was filed away, not printed, but in 1913, during demolition of the ruins, workers found a sealed iron box behind the altar. Inside, a scorched psalter, a lock of hair, a list of 143 names, a note signed CM. "If you find this, believe it. They made a place that swallowed girls. Do not let it be silent." Again, it was catalogued and misplaced. They called it the home on Red Hollow Hill, an orphanage slated for demolition in 1998. Behind a bricked-over alcove, a construction crew found a metal case. Inside, a girl's journal dated 1861 to 1862, a folded list of 143 names, 2 photographs, a melted rosary, and a letter. "If no one remembers us, we vanish twice. Tell the truth, even if no one listens. Tell it anyway." CM. The initials matched those from Saint Alora. CM. Clara Mullen. But this time, someone listened. Sarah Dorsey, a doctoral student at Wellesley, followed the trail. She traced the initials to an obituary. For Elra Miles, died 1922. The handwriting matched the journal. Clara Mullen had survived and spent her final decades writing, archiving, leaving a trail for someone to follow. Sarah spent 3 years combing archives. Each name told the same story. No death certificate, no transfer record, disappeared from registry. When Sarah knocked on doors and shared what she found, tears came, silence broke. One elderly woman, Martha Wren, had a family tale about a girl named Joanna who fled a terrible school. She held a necklace with a broken bell. I think she wanted us to remember. By 2002, the Elora Memory Archive was launched. They found 41 confirmed names with matching dates of entry and no exit. They found remnants of Sister Isolde's ledgers in Vatican archives. They found a note in Sister Eugenie's handwriting. "The furnace makes us clean. The silence makes us safe." On March 13, 2005, a memorial was erected near the field in memory of the silenced 143 girls known only to God. Once taken, now remembered. The truth will not rot in the ground. Each year, people leave offerings, ribbons with numbers, letters to the girls, silent bells. But here's what keeps me awake. Clara documented 143 girls. She left meticulous records. But in 2017, ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath the garden. The excavation team unearthed bone fragments, textile iron restraints. They stopped counting after 67 distinct remains, and they'd only excavated 1/3 of the garden. The real number could be double, maybe triple, which means there are girls whose names were never written down at all, not even in the red ledger, not even as numbers. Girls so thoroughly erased that even Clara, who remembered everything, never knew they existed. Who were they? Where did they come from? And how many other places like St. Elora existed across this country? Hidden behind stone walls and holy words and the silence of those who knew but never spoke. For every girl whose name we've reclaimed, there are dozens more still buried, waiting for someone to remember them, waiting for someone to say their names, even if we don't know what those names were. The girls of St. Elora were stolen twice, once by the institution that took their voices, their names, their lives, and again by a world that chose to forget. But Clara Mullen, number 41, refused to let them vanish. She carried their names in her bones. She carved their stories into history. She lit a fire that still burns today. And now you know, now you carry their names too. The silence has been broken, and it can never be whole again.